Well, I mean, obviously the big launch is what's been going on in your world. So it's been a busy week, right?
It's been a very busy week. We are live, John.
We are live. Okay, so I suppose we should get going. Hey, everyone. Welcome to SimplyThick John and Friends, where we dive into the world of dysphagia, thickening, and everything that makes swallowing safer, smoother, and a little more sane. I'm your host, John Hollihan, founder of SimplyThick. I'm a thickener enthusiast and the guy who went to college for paper science and engineering. Does anyone know what that is? Well, there might be a couple dozen of us. But hey, when I started studying pulp, it was just the beginning of a lifelong obsession with getting textures just right. This show is for anyone who cared for someone with swallowing disorders or just wanted things to be a little simpler, safer, and more dignified. And whether you're a clinician, a chef, a caregiver, a curious problem solver, welcome. You're in the right place. And so today we're going to talk about the value of being a lifelong learner, part of my career journey, and also Theresa's here. I don't know. I didn't go to grad school for speech pathology, and I didn't memorize all that stuff you guys did, cranial nerves and decoding MBS studies and stuff like that. But I've been lucky enough to work alongside with folks like yourself who did that and who try to help me understand it. And, you guys have to keep on learning. They stay curious. They ask questions. They share what they know and what they don't know. And they're the ones who raise their hands and say, wait a minute, isn't there a better way to do this? And that's what this mindset's about today. Because in the field of dysphagia, where the stakes are high and the answers aren't always clear, learning is the job. So like I said, today I brought along Theresa Richards. For those of you that don't know, I mean, I feel like everybody should know, right? But, you're the clinical speech pathologist who began your career traditionally and then got into mobile fees. And then you were just frustrated not knowing stuff. So you started the Swallow Your Pride podcast just to talk about things. Then you get millions of downloads. And then you founded the MedSLP Collective and then MedSLP Ed. Do I have all this right?
Yep. So
that you can have this community of learning and provide education and support. Then you went back and got a PhD in adult learning. Is that?
I'm still writing my dissertation on swallowing related topics, but my actual PhD will be in healthcare education and healthcare leadership.
Yes. So when we talk about somebody whose whole career has been built around learning and making an impact because of it, I mean, I can't think of anyone better, really. And, that's why when we talked about doing this, I was like, well, we got to talk about education and learning. So you've built these great platforms other than just learning. What really was the inspiration behind all of this?
Well, as you were saying all of these things, I was like, yes, but. And, I actually got into swallowing admittedly for no other reason than I just thought it was really fascinating, really understudied. And there weren't many people doing it in our field. And I was like, don't people understand the magnitude of this? Like, people can't swallow. Like, I can't think of anything that has more of an impact on quality of life than mealtimes. Everyone has Thanksgiving that revolves around an entire meal of eating. So just thinking of the actual quality of life implications is what made me passionate about swallowing. And then as the universe would have it, they gave me a child with complex special needs who was in the NICU for 15 days and couldn't eat, couldn't swallow, all those things. So that really, to be honest, I worked in swallowing before I had my son, but then once I had my son, that supercharged everything. Like, how do we not know answers to this? How is there no help for this? How do doctors not know what to tell me? Like, when he was in the NICU, they said, he'll just learn. And I was like, how does he just learn? Like, he's 15 days old. He's a baby. Like, how does he just learn? Like, don't you have a therapist? Don't you have SLPs? And they didn't. And we basically just got discharged with no help, no guidance, figure it out on your own. And so we did. So it's really, that has supercharged everything about my passion for getting people the help that they need with feeding and swallowing. And just from a really different perspective, I know there's people that get on their high horses about so many aspects of swallowing disorders and thickener, and should people not be on thickener and feeding tubes. And there's so many different aspects to this, but I come from it from a very different lens, from having experience with my own son that has actually challenged a lot of my professional beliefs too, of yes, this is maybe what we talk about in the professional world, but what I'm experiencing in my personal life is vastly different. So it's always challenged me to stay open to learning new things, to yeah, really being open-minded to a lot of this gray area. I think a lot of people in our field are very black or white. It's either you have to do this or you have to do that. And I've learned that we absolutely cannot live there. And that's not for the benefit of our patients, because it all depends on their goals, their needs, what's happening in their bodies at the moment, and what they want their quality of life to look like. And that can vary from each patient, and from time to time, they're entitled to change their mind. So
I kind of laugh because I have a degree in paper science and
you do.
engineering, and obviously this is where I was going to end up, right? The world of thickeners.
Well, and when you were introducing yourself, John, I thought you said you're a thickener influencer. And I was like, yes, it's exactly what you are, what you always wanted to be, a thickener influencer.
A thickener influencer. It has kind of become that way. And it's totally insane. It's totally insane.
Totally.
That, I barely passed my fluid mechanics class. I remember on the final, I totally it was an open book final, and I totally messed up. And there was one formula, it's the old books where the L looked like a 1. And I looked at this formula forever, and I was like, length has to be in this formula. And I even wrote in my book, I'm like, I don't understand why length isn't in this formula. And it was because in the textbook, the 1 and the L were the same character. And I was just like, and what's my whole career? Thickeners and thickening, and then moving into dysphagia for thickeners. And there's no way you could have predicted that.
Right.
Not at all.
Right.
So you were talking about gray areas a little bit. And there's a lot of gray areas in thickener. There's a lot of gray areas in other things. Is there a moment like in your career when you really realized it's okay not to have clear-cut answers? Or was this always you're just trying to find the clear-cut answers? And how does that really affect your approach, both in your personal side and in professionally?
Yeah, I think for me, it always goes, I have my beliefs, right? I have my biases, I have my professional opinions, as everybody does. And it's because of our professional opinions. But something I've really learned is that we never really truly know until we ask the patient, right? And I think, and I'm going to give a thickener example because this is your show, but it's actually very relevant here. I had a patient that we were trying to get off thickened liquids. I did a fees. We were doing all these therapies. And he finally said to me, Theresa, I don't mind being on this thick stuff. I said, what do you mean? And he's like, well, it just makes my life easier. Like when I drink the thin stuff, I cough. I have to do these strategies. I have to do these things. And it's just easier. And I was like, oh, okay. Do you want to keep doing therapy, or are you just cool? And he's like, no, I want to keep doing therapy, but I also just, that's not the goal, is to get, I'm fine on the thickener. And I was like, huh. And so that became sort of this both and conversation in my head. I think a lot of people in our field think it's either compensatory strategies or rehab. Yeah. And that was a really good example of, we can do both. You can be on the thickener and we can be working to improve your swallow.
Yeah. It's always weird because we get people who call us and they're like, oh, we have almost a full case left. He got off the thickener. What should we do with it? And first of all, we're like, hey, congratulations. And they're like, well, aren't you upset? And we're like, no, that's the whole point. I'm happy when you stop being a customer, when they graduate off thickener, that's always a good thing.
Yeah. That's one of my most favorite things that you've ever said to me. You said something like, people call us on one of their very worst days, and then it's really a great day to me when they stop using us. And I was like, as a business owner, I so appreciate that from you, John.
Yeah. I actually had somebody show up here last week. Show up after business hours, late at night. She thought we were like a retail store. And we're a warehouse. If you pull up in front of SimplyThick World headquarters, it does not look like a business that's open at 5:30 at night. There's no cars because I park way down at the other end of the building so I get in a healthy walk. And obviously she's desperate. And did I turn her away? No. Yeah. I'm like, here, have some thickener, go home. And then it turned out she was from 45 minutes away.
Crazy.
I was like, well, obviously she needed thickener way more than I was like, just take it, just go. Yeah. Because that was the right thing to do in that moment. You got to have a little bit of that extra compassion.
Of course.
So what kind of positive changes have you seen in how dysphagia is managed over the last 5-10 years?
Gosh, I think,
as you've been doing all these great education things.
Well, and I think that's exactly it. I think our education around it has improved significantly. I think, gosh, when did I start getting into this? education crusade, I would say probably 10 years ago, to be honest. And it's improved markedly, and I'm so happy. I think, so many people in our field are open to education, and want to learn more and realize how cool and fascinating it is. So I am really proud of our field for educating themselves. It's not a lot, it's not focused on much in grad school. So it really is something that you have to have a motivation and a drive and a desire to learn post-secondary education. I think anybody that wants to get into the field of dysphagia or swallowing disorders needs to understand that you're going to do a lot of self-study. And that's just the way it is right now until it's integrated a lot more into our graduate programs. And so I'm grateful that people are open to that and learning new techniques, new strategies, new assessment tools. And yeah, I'm just forever grateful that we're on this lifelong journey together. I think our research has improved drastically, dramatically. I think of when I started going to the Dysphagia Research Society, yeah, probably same, I think 12 years ago was my first time I went there. And I think of the work that's going on now, and there's so many more researchers and so much more work that's being done. And it's really, really cool to see. And I was reflecting on that about a month ago of how far we've come just since I've started attending those meetings 12 years ago.
It is continually evolving, and there's always so many cool ideas. And to go and just see year after year after year, the people grow, because a lot of times they come in and they're fresh grad students, and they grow, and then they become professors, and then they've got their own research crew or whatever, and it's fun to see.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't know how to handle DRS when I first started going too, and I didn't know anybody. And somebody was telling me this year how I terrified her when I came up and talked to her at her first poster.
Oh,
And she described what I did, and I was like, "Yep, sounds like my personality," because I didn't know what I was. But it's good to see all of that learning going on and all that stuff. So we have this big thing going on in the industry. We're adopting ITSE, and so I get asked to speak about, how do people implement this and do things like that. And at the same time, I'm hearing and seeing what you're doing with your kind of refocus and rebranding on adult education techniques. So how do you think ITSE implementation has been going, and are there things that you've been learning that could help people who are looking at how they're going to do their implementation?
I think ITSE implementation is going fair. Am I allowed to say that? Is that
Yeah.
okay? ITSE people, don't be mad at me.
No, I don't think any of us would argue. It's
Yeah,
going fair.
I love ITSE, and I love what it stands for. I think it's great. I still think it's too complex for a lot of these facilities and SLPs to grasp, and not the actual, I think the teaching of it. I just don't think we've taught it well. And I will say, I just don't think that enough clinicians have been accepted into the ITSE world to be able to go out and be the teachers and infiltrators of the facilities. So I think, I've tried to reach out and do more ITSE outreach, and it hasn't been received personally. So I just think, from that perspective, I think you've done a very good job of like the top down approach, but I think there also needs to be a bottom up approach from the SLPs infiltrating these facilities as well.
So, usually the way people are learning is like I do 1.5 or 2 hour webinars, which are the perfect way for adult education, right?
Nope.
How should we be doing it?
Well, and I shouldn't say that. I'd be remiss if I said that. A lot of people do like to learn that way. Times are just changing. I mean, the world is different this year. This year, last year, we're coming out of COVID where people caught on to online learning because it was our only way of communicating, right? So now we're coming out of the post-COVID era where people are just so zoomed out. They're so over Zoom. They're so over watching long things because it's what we had to do when we were locked in our homes and we couldn't go to live courses and things like that. That being said, there's just a lot of Zoom fatigue, for lack of a better term. But that being said, there are so many other ways, that things that I'm learning in my, healthcare and education and my PhD studies, just that people just want quick, digestible bites of information from people that they trust. And that's the combination, right? Anybody can talk about something, but is it somebody that they trust? And can it be delivered in a quick 10, 15-minute thing to at least get you hooked, right? Because people aren't going to just sign up for 2 hours of their life on Zoom if they're not hooked to begin with. So there's a lot to be said about not abandoning 2 hour webinars completely, but what can be put out to get people hooked in the first place, get them interested, get them to say, oh, this is something that I know we can integrate into our facility. I just might need a little bit more education, or no, you know what? This 15 minutes was enough. This was perfect. I'm going to go and run with it. And I think that's what there needs to be more of that, because clinicians are busy, right? Like there's so many productivity demands already. Clinicians don't even have time to stop and go to the bathroom, let alone have a cup of coffee, let alone have a sip of water, let alone sit down and watch a 2-hour webinar about how they're supposed to transform their entire facility by themselves. So how can we meet them halfway, and how can we, provide quick education? And I know a lot of PhDs, a lot of researchers fight me on that. They don't like that I say that, but I'm not saying the be all end all is a 10-15 minute presentation. I'm saying you have to get people to buy into what you're selling before they want to sign up for the big thing.
So are you saying that, for example, we should be producing 10 or 15 minute videos on demand, and then at the end of it, it's like, if you really like this, I have an expanded course.
Yep.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So my social media journey starts on TikTok, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you know why?
You are a thickener influencer on TikTok, John.
I am. You know why I picked TikTok? Because at the time, nobody I knew was watching it. And I literally set out to prove Gary Vaynerchuk wrong, because he said every business can benefit from social media. And I'm like, nope, thickeners and dysphagia, not a chance. And I started making these videos, and at the time was limited to 3 minutes. So I was really limited in what I could say.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about people want short things, I have a whole catalog of like 1,000 videos, all of them under 5 minutes,
right,
of just showing people how to do stuff.
Right. So think of that generation, right? So think of the TikTok generation, which we're on LinkedIn right now. And there may be some overlay in TikTok and LinkedIn, but there may not be, right? So you've nailed the TikTok generation, right? And that's how so many people just want to learn right now. Like that is how we are exposed to so many businesses. That's how we're exposed to so many concepts. You see a 90-second, 120-second video clip, and now you're sold in. Now you bought in. But I love that you've mastered the TikTok generation, but now we also work in healthcare with geriatrics that may not be the TikTok generation, but have still adapted to that learning style.
I'm going to have to take I'm doing an 1.5-hour webinar next week, which is down from 2 hours. And I'm going to have to take it and start chopping it up into 5-minute segments for TikTok. And just be like, here's this part of it. If you want to know more, here's the link to the video or something like that.
Right? I mean, think of IDSI. How many levels are there in IDSI?
8.
Okay, there are 8 videos.
Well, yeah, it depends on if you count level 7 EC as its own level, so you can do it under regular too. I mean, what are you going to say about regular food?
Right,
it's regular food.
There you go. There's 8 90-second videos. That's it. That's all you need to explain it.
Yeah, I've done those before, but see, now I sound like the old school company, right? Oh, we made a video like that once.
Right, you're the thickener influencer, John.
This is TikTok. You need to make the same video over and over because you say it differently every time.
Yep.
And this time it might catch with people. Because I've made videos thickening apple juice probably a dozen times, and one of them caught on and has 800,000 views, and another one of them has 300. And you're like, well, what's the difference? I can't tell.
And a lot of times you can't, right?
Yeah. It's the time and place. So, because you're on the forefront of like this education stuff and the training and things that are going on like that, how do you see like the MedSLP evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, especially around dysphagia management?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're entering this huge AI era right now, which I love. I think is so cool, and I use it to my advantage as much as possible. And I think that companies that embrace that and adopt that are going to be companies that survive. And I think companies that don't embrace that are not going to survive. And I hate to say that because I support any business owner that's out there doing the thing, especially supporting patients with dysphagia. But there's also a component of AI that cannot be replaced, and that's human connection, human compassion, human experience. And so I think there has to just be this perfect marriage of AI and human connection, human experience. And the tough part is if we talk about the TikTok generation, we talk about, maybe SLPs that are coming right out of grad school right now. They are so used to using AI for everything. They type a prompt into ChatGPT. Hey, tell me about this swallowing disorder, this nerve that's impaired, tell me what to see, tell me what you do, and they get a whole answer. So why do they need a lot of, as you say, 2-hour webinars? They don't, when they can get the answer at their disposal. So how do we adapt to that? How do we supplement that? How do we add to that? How do we add in that human connection, that human compassion, that human experience, clinical experience that only people that have worked in the field for 10, 20 years can provide? And so, like I said, I think just the future is that perfect marriage of that. And what does that look like? I don't know. We're living it out in real time right now. And we're in the middle of our MedSLP Collective Reimagined launch right now, which I'm so proud of our team. And we've got some really cool AI simulations and tools coming out. But also we've just revamped and brought in some really expert mentors that have years of clinical experience that can't be found in AI because, the conversations need to be teased out. Patients have so many other comorbidities and things going on. So I think it's just figuring out the best combination of that.
Have you seen, or have you thought, like, with AI rising and with, we've always learned from our elders. That's kind of the way things have gone. Do you see, or do you know, are they trying to, I don't know, somehow capture the because when we think about some of the people who have gone on and have retired or passed away or whatever, they had a huge base of knowledge that wasn't there and is no longer there for the industry to really capture or imagine, just other than the students they mentored. Do you see anything in AI where we're going to start capturing people towards the end of their careers and be like, here it goes, we're going to feed in all of your email and all this, or make it available? So
that's interesting. It's an interesting concept. I think human connection is going to be so much more embraced. Like I envision like small talk and small conversations just going away. Like I think people are either going to go to AI for the information they need, or they're going to go to a human for connection and experience they need. And there obviously is so much wisdom that we can learn from our elders, and I don't know how that gets captured. Really good. So
I guess with the AI stuff, I found myself a few times wondering, it'd be really nice to have like my grandparents kind of share their wisdom into an AI somehow, and I could ask them questions now.
Yeah. It wouldn't be hard to do, and I'm sure someone will come up with that at some point.
Yeah.
But then, it's just it's tough because there are some AIs that whatever you feed into it becomes public knowledge, or there's some AIs that you feed into it that's just become, they're behind a security wall. They're just for your own company. And that's something to be concerned about too. People put in like financial numbers and things like that, and we're like, no, don't do that. So there's all sorts of security things, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Do you have any thoughts on, from a systems level, what changes would you love to see to elevate standard of care for dysphagia?
That's a great question. There's a lot of things I would love to see. I think if I could wave a magic dysphagia wand, I would want every single facility, every single SLP to have access to FEES, video fluoroscopy, manometry, no questions asked, whatever test you need, you get done. Because I think we're either overdiagnosing or underdiagnosing a majority of patients that way without proper imaging. So from a systems level, if we could just get every single hospital administrator, director, nursing director, or rehab, anybody that works with any patient with swallowing disorders to understand that we need that first and front line of care. That is the standard of care. And unfortunately, we do get a lot of pushback from that, from people that say there's, that costs money, a financial aspect, but it actually saves a ton of money in the long run. And that's actually part of my PhD dissertation, is how getting these instrumental assessments done in the beginning saves us billions in public healthcare dollars. And it's something that I want to do a much more large scale study on later. But I would just love every administrator to understand that first and foremost, that is the standard of care, and it is cost savings for the patient in the long term. Because we could just be doing therapy on patients for weeks and months on the wrong things, or they may not even have dysphagia.
Have you, in your PhD work, did you find any ways to speed up the implementation stuff? The moving from the clinic to the facility, or from the research lab to the facility?
I've always done a lot of work in that myself. I don't know that there's a faster way to do it other than just if we had to wave a magic wand or, to be honest, we were talking a little bit about payer sources off camera, but to be honest, I wish a lot of payer sources would push back on therapy without an instrumental assessment. I've heard of some like home health companies that won't approve therapy without an instrumentation done first. And I love that. I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
Because like I said, we either can be treating the wrong things, we can be providing treatment that doesn't need to happen, or we're just treating the wrong things, or we could be harming the patient. We're really supposed to do no harm, and we can be doing harm. We're manipulating a patient's airway, for God's sake, without any sort of imaging.
That is the surprising thing, is that imaging is seen as sort of a luxury. Is that the right word?
It's seen as like a nice to have. Like, yeah, that'd be nice if we could do that, but we can't do that here. Why? And it's honestly, it's the same exact argument of, our PT friends. Like, I want to get on the PT train of like whatever PT was able to push x-rays across for everybody. You would never have a patient get up and walk with a broken hip without an x-ray first. Like, that's just unheard of. Like, any doctor would look at you sideways if you said, okay, 90-year-old lady, get up and walk. I know your hip's broken, but just do it. No, like they would say you're nuts. And I think that's the same with swallowing.
So let's see, you took a fall, you're 90 and your hip hurts.
Yeah.
You'll be fine.
Get up and walk. It's a luxury here to have x-rays.
Yeah. Did you know x-rays cost money? But somebody starts coughing when they're drinking thin liquids and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
The imaging may
pour
not
more
be.
water down there and see what happens to their airway.
Yeah. And then the numbers are just fresh in my mind because I just looked at them the other day. But when I go to the CDC database and I look at statistics for people, these are death certificates. So you can have up to 20 causes of death. There's like the proximate one, and then there's underlying causes. If they have dysphagia and they have obstruction of the airway, asphyxiation on food, or I forget if it's food. Yeah, it's food, blocking the airway. You put those two codes together with the word and you can search, I think, 5 years at a time. The last time I did it, it was like 1,200 death certificates had that, which breaks out to 230 a year. Or, 2 out of every 3 days, somebody in the US who has dysphagia is asphyxiating on their food. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, we kind of shake our heads about it, but at the same time, where's the instrumentation going on? And, sometimes it's the miscommunication, which is one of the reasons ITSE's taken off is, the communication of that.
Correct.
You and I don't have to, I used to argue with people like you all the time. How thick is thick?
Right.
First 15 years of my career.
In there and jiggle it and it looks good.
Yeah. And then
that's it, John, right?
And then I would sit there and I would say, well, actually, when you look at the shear rheology and the pseudoplasticity and the shear thinning and blah, 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 it's thick enough. And then you would just go, yeah, I don't know, John. It doesn't look
Whoever
thick
invited the paper scientist to this conversation. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think what else you want to share about, this reimagined MedSLP training? I've just heard little snippets and read little bits, but I know you're very excited and you put in a tremendous amount of time. So what can people hear about how you reimagine this?
What I teased out a little bit here is, we're turning a lot of our learning to different social learning theories, active learning theories. We've got a lot of simulations coming out where SLPs can actually, get feedback from an AI generated simulation of, okay, this patient has all these comorbidities. What do you do next? Okay, no, that's wrong. Consider this. Okay, now the patient's coughing. How does that change your perspective? So going through these critical thinking scenarios, which is not something we've been able to find in our field yet, and something I'm really, really proud of. But then here's also the human experience side. We do have that coupled with, okay, now talk to an actual mentor after you've completed that. Do you agree with it? Did you get stuck on something? Do you disagree with something? Would you do something different if this patient had this? And so, like I said, there's just so much power in combining this really cool world of AI, but then also the human experience side. And then we also have these new demo and discuss features where, like I said, we're done with the 2-hour webinars. We are doing 15 minutes of just showing you how to do the thing. So there's so many SLPs that, now we're taking all of this online education, which I'm super, super grateful for. They learn, 8 hours of research and all of these concepts that went into creating this theory, creating this strategy, but they never actually get to see how the strategy is done. So we are just showing them how to do the thing. So they want to learn this therapy strategy. They want to learn this compensatory strategy. They want to see how this assessment's done. We are bringing in the experts with either patients or just patient simulations and showing them how to do that thing. And then also having the live human experience of Q&A after that. So really, really excited. We've also elevated our mentorship a lot, where our mentors, just brilliant. I'm so impressed with their knowledge base, but give answers within 24 hours. We've got guarantees on that now, which I'm really excited about. I think there's a lot of trust issues going on too in the internet world, and I want to do what I can to support SLPs and also provide them the trust that we are there to help them. We can be their trusted mentorship partner. So yeah, really excited about all that. Thank you for asking.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I know that in my world, we were doing these webinars and I was like, this stuff's really, I'm talking about food preparation now. And I was like, the techniques we have, it's so easy. We can do this. And I said, do you think we could do a webinar where like for 2 hours, we just made food? And we do that. Yeah. And it's a totally insane thing to do, but it's been well received. And afterwards, it's like, people are like, oh, that's so easy. And you're like, yeah, it doesn't matter how many times I tell you or I explain you or tell you. Once I show people, they're like, oh, I get it now.
Right. That's exactly the same thing. But it's also funny. I know this is live, but I also hate watching things live because every time I watch a video or listen to a podcast, I put it on 2 or 3x.
Yep.
I just have to I just want to hear the stuff and then I'll fast forward to whatever pertains to me. And that's honestly how I listen to all my PhD lectures too. I just run it through, listen to it 2 or 3x. And then if I find a spot that I'm really interested in, I'll download the transcript and pop that into AI and tell them to tell me the highlights of that. And that's how I learn it. And so I just got thinking, why are we drowning people in hours and hours of information? Just give them what they need to know. So that's really where a lot of this came from, as well as just my own learning experiences.
Yeah, I think that, it kind of hit when I would do demonstrations live, people would be like, okay, I get it. Mm-hmm. And then we would do a webinar and we would explain it. And then people were like, I don't, they'd be asking questions. We're like, no, they didn't get it. And, now I'll do things. I've been invited to some facilities, I'll fly out to Vancouver or whatever and meet with a group of 10 people and just show them. And then you can just see the light bulbs going off, not just what I'm doing, but what they're going to do to take it better, because I'm a paper scientist. I'm not a chef. I'm not a trained dietitian or a clinical nutrition manager, or whatever. So I can show you the basic techniques, but I want you guys to take it and run with it.
And I think that's what frustrates me, for lack of a better term, about IDSI is I know there's the pyramid, there's all these graphics, there's all these drawings, and I'm sure in somebody's brain those are helpful. But in mine, I'm like, what does that have to do to making liquid thicker? So when I watch you do the stuff, I'm like, oh, super easy. When I watch you do the fork test, got it, super easy. So, I think that's just the fascinating part of I'm sure those triangles are super helpful to some people, but for some other people, that's not how they learn. And I think when you're trying to roll out something as life-changing as IDSI, it needs to be tailored to different learning styles.
Well, it's a perfect example. If you go read the IDSI testing methods document, it's called 20, 30 pages. And you're reading and they'll say, okay, we're going to do the fork drip test. This is what it means on this level. This is what it means on that level. This is what it means on that level. And then you read the spoon tilt test. And then I'm like, okay, so I'm making a minced and moist food. What do I need to do? And so when I did a webinar on the IDSI testing methods, I took it out and I just drew from the triangle little boxes. And I'm like, here's the test methods for this level. Here's the test methods for this level. And we hand that out to all kinds of people because that's how our brains work, right?
Yeah.
It's not, here's the testing methods and what levels they apply to. It's, I'm making this level. What test methods do I need?
Right.
And then the next one is, everybody says, oh, it's going to take too long to test. And then you're like, well, this is what it takes to test minced and moist.
Yeah.
Pick it up with a fork, put the fork through it. You see that it goes between the tines. Then you pick up the fork and then you look to see if anything's dripping out of it. And then you take up a spoon, you take that and you turn it sideways and let it fall off. And it takes under 10 seconds.
And I'll share
you just did 3 tests in 10 seconds. Okay, that's not a big deal.
Yeah. I'll share with you a personal story that's, going on in my life right now is we, talk about my worlds colliding with my son, with my professional life. So we finally decided to get my son a feeding tube. He's 9 years old, and it's just been years and years of standing on our head trying to get this kid to eat. He's never had a aspiration, never had a pneumonia, but I should say never had an aspiration. I don't know that. He's never had aspiration pneumonia, but just takes him so long, just gets fatigued, just has very poor oral motor skills. Anyways, very poor weight gain. All that to say, we finally decided to get a feeding tube. So not that I really never thought about it, but I didn't think it was that, I didn't think it was for us. And when I think of feeding tubes, I think of the patients I always worked with in the hospitals and the ICUs. They're on the pump. They've got the tube that comes down from the pump. And, I'm like, my son would have a field day with that. He would rip that, like, that's not happening. And I had a friend that said to me, have you guys ever considered a feeding tube? It's been such a blessing for our family. And I said, oh my God, nobody's ever said it to me like that. And I said, why do you say that? And she goes, it takes 45 seconds to do a tube. And I said, what? And she was like, yeah, it takes 45 seconds to pour 500 calories in a tube and he's done. And we go on with our day and I know he's got his nutrition. And I was like,
wow.
What? And literally hearing that, like, I was mind blown, but also so frustrated that no one ever explained it to me that simply, that it would only take 45 seconds. That being said, I do have a bone to pick with the IDSI people. Always. So the night I get home, we had a wonderful surgeon, a wonderful hospital team, but a horrific experience. And I blame that on, we had the most wonderful people in the worst system ever created. We get home and the hospital had no supplies to send us home with. Like, one of the nurses went and found a carton of something. I go to put it in the tube. It's my first night home with him by myself. He's all groggy from the anesthesia. I try to pour this liquid through a small tube.
Yep.
It does not go. It clogs. I'm suctioning it. I'm pinching doing everything. I finally just had a total meltdown. I called my friend. She came over and helped. And she was like, do you know how thick this formula is? And I was like, no. And she went to pour it in the sink. And I was like, oh my God. And so I start looking at the container, at the carton. There's no IDSI level on it. There's no nothing on it. And I was like, how does this not have an IDSI level on it? Because it's also a formula that my son used to just drink orally, but because it's a calorie supplement. So I just, I couldn't believe that a lot of these formula companies of tube feeding formula, which is also oral nutrition formula, still don't have IDSI on there because it was super stinking thick.
It's all voluntary. That's the problem.
Right.
So you should call them and complain.
I will.
So
yeah.
37 minutes. I mean, we could just keep going and going and going, but we're trying to keep these to half an hour. And I know it's Friday afternoon.
It is.
So, I
just drank my coffee, so I'm ready to go.
Say big thanks to you, my friend.
Yep.
And appreciate you sharing everything today. What's the best place for people to follow up and connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Theresa Richard. I'm also on Instagram, Theresa Richard SLP. I would say those are the two best places to find me.
All right, cool. Thanks for watching, everyone. If this was helpful, pass it along, and we'll see you next time. SimplyThick John and Friends.
Thanks,
Stay
John.
thick out
Appreciate
there.
you.